Hello and welcome back. Today we will be continuing our Victoria 3 tutorial series, and we are going to be doing a tier list on the late game society tech. This tier list will include all of the tier 3, 4, and 5 society tech for a total of 26 techs. This tier list is going to be one of the weirder looking shaped tier lists because the society tech for the late game is generally really polarized. We have a ton of useless tech, and then we also have some of the very best tech. In my mind, the tech you actually want to rush most often is in the tier 4 society tech, so we'll get to that. But before we do that, we're going to first talk about some background conditions, then we'll jump into the entire tier list, and then at the very end we'll have a summary, so if you kind of just want the quick and dirty, feel free to skip ahead to the summary. So let's jump in and talk about some background sort of stuff. Okay, so first of all, for all the tech, there's 5 tiers. You can see Central Archives is tier 2. If you have currently tech unfinished in the previous tier, going to the next tier will incur a pretty sizable penalty, and so on how quickly you can research it. And so we are incurring a penalty here in Byzantium, going for a tier 3 human rights when we have tier 2 tech unresearched. Because of this, what your strategy will often be is to pick up techs in various tabs, in the 3 tabs, and you just pick and choose the best techs and let the other ones natural spread to you. So the strategy often involves natural spread. Natural spread will pick up kind of the earliest tier tech it can possibly do. And so what this means in terms of strategy and how we are rating things is this rating is not based on power in a vacuum. The rating is based on prioritization, because very often you're getting all the techs no matter what. And so the question is not how good is this tech in a vacuum. The question is how likely am I to research this technology the moment I can research it. And so this will inform our strategy. So there can be techs that are just very strong in a vacuum that are going to score really low on this tier list as a result of, you just don't research them when they first become available. And so it's important to keep this in mind when we're going through our tier list. I'm not trying to argue that certain techs are necessarily the best ones, merely that you want to research them or you don't want to research them, although often there's a very strong correlation. Let's jump into the tier list, or let's actually just come over here, because we're going to be talking about steel frame buildings very first. Steel frame buildings is quite strong. It gives you covered markets, which is going to give you kind of a sink for your glass and your steel in your urban centers. This notably is pretty good for getting your economy to look more industrial, because as you create demand for steel, steel's not that efficient in terms of PMs, generally speaking, but what steel does have inputs for is for coal and iron, which is relatively efficient. These have inputs, for tools and stuff like this, and glass is somewhat efficient as well. And so overall, it is fairly good, and it is also like free efficiency in buildings, and these will have extra employment and these sorts of things. You also get you get just a ton from this tech. You also get extra land trade capacity, construction sector max level, which actually makes a pretty big difference if you're on a smaller country, and also helps for building tall, because the extra construction centers, when they're all built up in one place, will give you construction efficiency, which is quite nice. Max infrastructure per 100k population. Some people rate this very highly. I don't think it's as valuable as a lot of other people seem to think it is, based on my other video, but this is just something to keep in mind. And of course, this has a cap of plus 20, so I believe at 2 mil pops you incur the absolute max you can get in terms of this free infrastructure. It does unlock the unique buildings Eiffel Tower and Statue of Liberty. Notably, if you have New York, this tech becomes really high priority because the Statue of Liberty is quite strong. We'll take a look in a second. It's already been built, but the big thing is it unlocks steel frame buildings, which is quite an efficient PM. It is a lot better than the previous one, and will also move you in a direction where you are less focused on rural goods. If we see it requires tools, glass, steel, and explosives, so this gets rid of the need for fabric, the demand for fabric, the buy orders for fabric, and will reorient you in a more industrial pattern as a result. And so this is actually quite good. And so we will come into that, and we'll talk about it in just a moment. And then for mutual funds, it gives you plus 10% minting, which is decent, minus loan interest rate, which is also decent. Stacking these modifiers together is quite good, or just stacking rather the loan interest rate is quite good if you're going to deficit spend. And it also is the very important publicly traded. Okay, so let's jump back into our thing and get going. So For this, we are going to put steel frame buildings in A tier. It is often very, very, very good. It will not always be a rush, and very often you will want to like research industrial tech and stuff beforehand, but it is always good. It's never bad. Sometimes it's exceptional, you know, if you are going to be getting the Statue of Liberty, which is quite good, but we're going to put it there. Also in A tier, I kind of had a hard time deciding whether these should be A or S tier. We're going to put mutual funds. Mutual funds is quite good because publicly traded is extremely good. It is extremely good. Like, this is a absolute rush if you are very agrarian or have a ton of agrarian buildings, because what this will do is, let's jump back into the game and talk about it. What this will do is it will change the ownership of your buildings, and it will make it more oriented towards capitalists. So if we take a look and we look at some arable land, we notice we do have some farms here. What it will do is it will swap it from privately owned, which has 100 aristocrats, to publicly traded, which will have 100 aristocrats and 50 capitalists per level. What this will do is it will greatly increase the investment pool contribution. Normally, when you get on laissez-faire and you also have happy industrialists that are powerful, you will be getting 29% of the dividends or the weekly balance in capitalist owning buildings contributed to your investment pool. But you only get 10% under these conditions of your contribution for, and this is a little bit of an oversimplification, from the aristocrats. And so generally you want to kind of forego the rural buildings. And so as a consequence of this, if you can get the ownership to be part capitalist, what will end up happening is it'll be 16.3 repeating percent contribution, which is much, much better. Also, if you get mutual funds in conjunction with specifically Pumpjacks, which basically doubles plantation outputs and to a lesser extent improve fertilizer, which improves grain outputs by quite a bit, this will be quite a nice inflection point. And so mutual funds is conditionally insane if you already have a pretty heavy rural base with a lot of plantations. If you don't, it's not like always good in the same way steel frame buildings is always good, but that is contextually insane. You can kind of think of it as either being in S tier or being in B tier, you know, depending on exactly what your country looks like, this sort of thing. And so, okay, and then real quick, steel frame buildings is an uber S tier if you own New York. And this is because the Statue of Liberty gives 25% migration attraction to all states in your country. And this is extremely strong and very, very, very good for pulling people in. So if you manage to grab New York or you're in the USA, it becomes a very large prioritization. All right, let's jump back into looking at some of these texts, because identification documents is next, and this begins kind of our beginning of looking at a bunch of D tier texts, because there's a whole lot in the technology tree for society. This is D tier. Gives some taxation of capacity, max home affairs. You're not going to be at a position at this point in the game where you're getting tier 3 tech that you're really maxing out your institutions, so max home affairs is pretty whatever, even though home affairs is decent. Pan-nationalism, 10% authority. I believe it is important for some nation formation events and this type of thing, but if you're not doing one of these things, it's not going to be useful, and very often you won't necessarily need to rush this in order to do your nation formation thing. So, also D tier. Not very good. And next we have human rights, which if you notice in our Greece run here, we might come off of this, but at this current juncture, we are rushing it. And this is extremely strong. It gives you max social security investment. That's not what it's about, but it also unlocks compulsory primary school, protected speech, workers' protections. None of these are especially important. It's multiculturalism that's extremely important, because for some countries, this will be really how you get a lot of labor, and for some countries, this will be an absolute rush, and it will almost always be good. It will not infinitely be good, or just like 100% of the time be good, but when it's good, it's really, really, really good, and sometimes you rush it ahead of time. Notice, for almost every tech, you kind of want to research all the techs in the tier before moving on. We are not doing that here. We are going straight into human rights, because it is such a high-level prioritization for us at this point in the game, and so this is what we're going to be doing. I mean, maybe we could do Q9 into human rights, so this would be a little bit better, but it's it's very, very, very strong just because multiculturalism is very strong. And specifically the condition we have is we have already triggered the path to liberalism, and we have gotten our radical. This will change a little bit in 1.3 when you can invite people, and you can invite radicals. But if this guy dies before we pass multiculturalism, we're going to have a hard time passing multiculturalism. And so it's essential we try and get on that immediately. And so we are going to be putting it, coming back in, we're going to be putting it in A tier. Now, the reason it's not S tier, and I thought a little bit about this, and I kind of waffled back and forth. I actually waffled on all three of these. Here, let's put these in D tier where they belong. I don't think it matters too much where they are. But the reason we are putting it in A tier is because it is not always super, super good. When it is good, it is really good. But we're going to put it in A tier because it's not always going to be good. And we'll put it behind mutual funds because there are some runs where labor's not really a problem and you don't really prioritize this at all. And so we'll just put it in A tier. It's really strong. But only under certain conditions. In the same way, mutual funds will probably be a little bit more consistent than human rights, but when it's good, it's not going to be as good as human rights. And steel frame building is just exceptionally more consistent, but again, the power level is lower when it's good. Civilizing Mission allows you to build a canal, and more importantly, it lets you give +1 on your institution level for colonization, which you will often want to put up. But it comes at a time where there's a bunch of other tier 3 tech. The tier 3, like, entry level for the society tech is extremely strong, and Civilizing Mission comes at a time when you can research all these other 3 immediately, and as a consequence, Civilizing Mission suffers quite a bit from that. Also, the extra level of colonization is okay, but you don't usually want to research it just for the extra level of colonization and then you're satisfied or whatever. And so we're going to put it here in C tier, but at the top of C tier with the recognition that, there are going to be some situations where you prioritize it, but it's not going to be a prioritization for a lot of countries. Very often, you will get onto the quinine, and then you kind of just chill and focus on other things. Other technologies, you go back to the production tech, and you don't really push for Civilizing Mission very, very quickly. You'd rather get the better production tech or one of these 3 techs here when Civilizing Mission becomes available, and it just kind of suffers from being there in poor timing. Next up, we have Anarchism, which is overall not very good. It unlocks the Anarchy Party, which I'm not entirely sure whether I think that that's net negative or net positive. We can jump in and take a closer look at the game, actually. Let's do that. But it unlocks the Anarchism Party, and it also gives you the Anarchy distribution of power, which is just bad, but it notably does do something good. If you're trying to pass Council Republic relatively early, this will increase the attraction of the Anarchist group, which is willing to pass Council Republic, and so this will have some use. We're going to put it in the bottom of tier C. For camera, this is kind of a bit of a nothing burger tech. It does give you a better PM for arts academies, but you're not really looking to ever push arts academies anyways, and so this is kind of like not much of a... I might just be like misvaluing arts academies in general, but they don't contribute a lot to the investment pool, and what you get from them mainly is going to be like clout on your intelligentsia. But I think it's better to just try and push, higher level of university in the capital in order to chase this. The 5% prestige is rarely going to make a difference because there's a narrow inflection point where prestige matters, and that's when you are about to go up to the next tier. And so as a consequence, camera is going to be in D tier. Next up, we have Socialism, which gives several things. It gives plus minimum expected standard of living. It gives extra workplace safety. Institutions, at this point in the game, it's not going to be a useful thing because you're not maxing out institutions. It will unlock Council Republic, but it will be kind of hard to go Council Republic generally immediately after researching Socialism. It unlocks graduated taxation, which is decent, but can be difficult to push. And it also unlocks the Communist Party. Let's jump back into our browser and kind of catch up on things and talk about things. So we put Anarchism back here, we put camera in D tier. We're going to put it at kind of a higher D tier because it does give a PM. And we're going to talk about Socialism. So a big thing about Socialism is it unlocks your ability to roll 2 ideologies, and it also gives your ability to go up to graduated taxation. Graduated taxation is good, but I often don't find myself necessarily rushing Socialism just to get graduated taxation, but it is going to be, relatively good. And so we're going to put this in the back of B tier, or in B tier right now. It is very often a solid tech, but it kind of suffers from these 3 techs being really good, and the tier 3 checks in general, just these 3 entry ones kind of push out socialism, because you'll almost always want to go these 3 before socialism for just about any time. And so socialism does suffer a little bit, but it is going to be very high prioritization if you are trying to go Council Republic, because it will allow you to, first of all, allow you to go Council Republic, but it'll also allow you to roll the ideologies. Philosophical pragmatism, I think, gives tax capacity. We'll take a closer look at it, but we're just going to put it here in behind cameras in D tier. All right, now feminism gives you access to increased workforce ratio in terms of your laws, and also you can roll the feminist ideology, which is going to be good. This is an extremely strong modifier, the extra workforce ratio, and we're going to put feminism in B tier, and then we're going to take a closer look at elevators. We're going to jump back into the game, and we're going to look at several of these things. All right, philosophical pragmatism, as promised, it gives bureaucracy population cost modifier. This is somewhat good if you're playing like China or Japan, but this is never like a rush for China or Japan at any situation. It's just conditionally better if you have more pops. Then we have feminism, which gives unlocks women in the workplace, and also women's suffrage. Women's suffrage is going to be really good on almost every country, as long as you're relying on migration for, your pop growth, because workforce ratio is an extremely powerful modifier if you are relying on migration, and same with dependent enfranchisement. The minus birth rate is obviously bad, and so the only countries where this tech is maybe not a priority is going to be the really high pop countries like East India Company or China. All right. Let's go into elevators. So elevators, again, is very similar to steel frame buildings on this part, where it's giving extra construction center max level, extra infrastructure, yada yada, and it also unlocks arcades. Arcades is, again, going to be good for pushing the demand in terms of the glass and the steel, but this isn't quite as good as, the steel frame buildings. This is going to be a decent tech, but it also comes at a point in time where it doesn't suffer as much from there being a ton of really good tier 4 tech. In fact, there's only one other tier 4 tech that's particularly really standoutish in society tech. And so sometimes you will just hit a situation where you can go the tier 4 tech without a malice, and elevators is just really solid. And so elevators will score pretty high, in that sense. It would score much lower if it was just next to steel frame buildings. I think it was important to note, because there's so many really good entry-level tier 3 tech, but we're going to put elevators in B tier. Next up, we have Zeppelins. So let's jump back into our browser and talk about Zeppelins. So actually, let's just quickly look at what Zeppelins gives you. It unlocks the airship mooring post, which gives you plus 10 prestige. And so Zeppelins are a whole nother tier onto themselves. Let's create a new tier here, and we're going to insert one below, and we're going to name it meme tier. And we're going to, oh, no, that's not what we wanted. We wanted to rename this one. This is D tier, and the mooring ship, this is just meme tier. This is, you only get it when you're trying to flex on the AI. This is the only reason to get this tech. It just gives you a little bit of prestige, and it makes blimps fly around. And this is the only thing it does, and it's just, it's funny. I get excited, and I like watching the blimps fly around, but this is all it does, and in addition to the plus 10 prestige or whatever. And you also have to build the office buildings beforehand. Anyways, it's not good. Don't ever intentionally go it unless you just want to flex on the AI, I guess. It's just an amusement sort of one. But we'll put elevators behind feminism here and ahead of socialism. Again, just want to point out that I think socialism's a better tech than elevators, but elevators comes in the tier 4 entry level where, you're not competing with all these tier 3 techs. International exchange, if I'm not mistaken, is the classic 2% decreased interest, as well as 10% increased minting. This is going to be in D tier, but it's going to be at the top end of D tier because the minting is pretty good. You know, very often if you will be researching this when you want to push into the next level of tech, or these types of techs when you are trying to push the next level. Next, we have central planning, which unlocks a couple things. It unlocks command economy. Let's actually just jump into the game and look at it. And so, we'll grab that. So central planning unlocks command economy, which I think is just generally pretty bad. It's going to be, command economy is going to be extremely good when your GDP is like maybe 500 mil to 800 mil, or anything lower than 500 mil as well. But if you don't have a GDP of 500 mil by the time you can research central planning, then there's some things going on. And it can often be difficult because you have to go like Council Republic first. It also gives plus taxation capacity. These aren't really where it's at, the reason to research this. The reason to research this is telephone switchboards, which is extremely good. It's going to add a ton of taxation capacity as well per level, which is particularly good in the high population places, in addition to the excess bureaucracy. This is quite good. It will allow you to, you know, put in a bunch more institutions at an inflection point, and so it will be really powerful in this way. And it's very often good to go telephone switchboards, or it's good to go central planning if you've already unlocked telephone, and if you've already unlocked central planning, then it's really good to go telephone. But I don't generally feel that it's good to research both just to get both of them. So I think the general strategy is you wait for one to natural spread to you, and then you just research the other kind of immediately once the other one's natural spread to you. But we are going to put this up in B tier. Alright, next we have multilateral alliances. It allows multiple alliances. Alliances kind of just are, as of the current patch we're in, they're just not really a mechanic that has any sort of use. And so we're just going to, you know, put this in D tier. Okay, let's put the stuff and then come back to malaria prevention, because we got a lot to say about malaria prevention. So let's, before we get too haggard and tired, let's put the things where they belong. So central planning, we're going to put behind feminism. In that it is conditionally really good. I don't think you go out of your way to go central planning telephones. Sometimes you do, but once you get one, then you generally really want to go the other. And then we are going to put this multilateral alliances kind of pretty much towards the very end of this. It's just not very good. And then we have malaria prevention. So let's hop back into the game and talk about malaria prevention, because I actually think this is the most rushable tech in the entire game. In the entire game, if there was an Uber S tier, malaria prevention would be in it. I think it is the most worth rushing. It gives you plus max colonial affairs. That's the like whatever, but it removes all negative effects from severe malaria in your colonies and states. And what this does fundamentally is the whole rush for Africa is really about just establishing cutting people out from getting into Africa. And if you can get this ahead of time, what you can do is you can just snag all of the coast, make it so no other great powers have any coastal access, and then you get all of this land for free, no infamy, you know, over time, over an extended period of time, which is absolutely tremendous if you are trying to go a low infamy type of playstyle, which I do. It's going to be, obviously, it's going to be way, way worse if you're just like, I want to go to 1k infamy and just like crush everyone and this sort of thing. And so maybe I'm overvaluing this, but just the ability to cut people off out of the Congo, in addition to, you know, occasionally having to take wars for them, and then get all of this Congo land really quickly, is extraordinarily valuable in my estimation, and we're going to put it in Uber S tier. This is the S-est of tiers for malaria prevention. I just think it's incredibly strong, especially if you're playing as a really strong GP at the start of the game. You can just completely cut off the Congo, and there's nothing anyone can do about it if you kind of push ahead for malaria prevention and then rely on your natural spread to kind of pick up your other technologies. Okay. Next up, we have political agitation, which is good if you're going fascist. This is kind of what it does. It allows you to roll some of the fascist interest groups. It gives you outlawed dissent, which is bad, and unlocks the fascist party. And I've been unimpressed with like going the fascism route. Maybe I need to re-explore it, but this is going to be D tier. Film, again, we're not trying to really push the arts academies, and it's the +5 prestige thing, basically exactly the same as camera, D tier. Psychoanalysis. This is going to give us bureaucracy per population cost and influence, basically the exact same as pragmatism, D tier. And so let's come in and put stuff in tiers. and come back to the thing. So, malaria prevention, S tier. Political agitation, D tier. We're going to put it pretty low because I actually think the fascist stuff is bad, and so we're just going to put it down there. We're going to put this, I guess, behind camera because you're more likely to, like, the camera's tier 3, this is tier 4. We're going to do this same with this, we're going to put it behind pragmatism. I'm not super sweating putting all these D tier stuff in the correct spot. All right, next up we have paved roads, which gives kind of the same benefits that elevators and steel frame buildings did in terms of the extra free infrastructure, the extra overland trading route, and the the extra infrastructure, the overland trading. I think there's one other thing. We'll take a look in a second. But we're gonna put this in. I mean, it's not bad, but it's in C tier. Occasionally this is okay. We're gonna put it behind Civilizing Mission. Sometimes you just research it. I don't know. It's like, so it's what you have, like this kind of class of text where you're like, oh, that actually does something, and this class of text, it's like, wow, that does basically nothing. And so it does something, but it's really not that big a deal. We have modern financial instruments, which is going to give you the loan interest rate as well as we'll actually come back in a second. So paved roads is the start of the tier 5 tech. And let's actually just put paved roads back here, and we're going to talk about this. So, paved roads, the problem with paved roads is it's tier 5 tech in addition to all this, and so by the time you can get here, you're almost always, once you're in like tier 5, you'd rather push like the military tech, or even the production tech. And so I think in terms of power level, it shouldn't be in D tier for paved roads, but we're going to put it in D tier anyways. It's going to be at the top of D tier. But, you know, these modifiers are also normally, notably, like, the more of them you get, the less valuable they are. And you've already gotten these modifiers, like, 1, 2, 3, kind of 4 times. Or is this even add that as well? 5 times. And so, like, it's really not adding a whole lot proportionally in terms of base values. I think going out of you research this when you have nothing else to research, and so we're gonna put it in D tier as well. Modern financial institutions, also kind of similar situation. The minting and the loan interest rate, notably the loan interest rate is going to be better, you know, the more of it you stack. But the problem is that you are kind of reaching a point in the game where the investment pool transfer is falling off a little bit, and you might be thinking of going Council Republic, and deficit spending is it's much better if you are doing laissez-faire than if you are going Council Republic, is my opinion. Although it's still okay. Maybe this is still going to be D tier. Next up, we have macroeconomics, which gives you trade route volume and trade route competitiveness. If you are doing like a low infamy play, where you're not getting embargoed a ton by this late in the game, which is going to be a playstyle thing, then I actually rate macroeconomics like decently and would put it in B tier. So let's come back in and talk about the C. Oop. Oh, did I have the thing messed up? No. Okay, I apologize for that. Let's jump back into the browser. I'm not gonna scuff the entire video though, because I'm 27 minutes in. Let's go, baby. Alright, so modern financial instruments, we're gonna put kind of... I actually think it might be better than paved road, to be honest, the minting and the... But it's like, it's tough. This will actually go in B tier. We're gonna put it ahead of socialism. I think that this is, it gives pretty good modifiers, and so... Okay. Mass surveillance is booty. Antibiotics is booty. Let's talk about why. Let's jump into all of these and talk about why they're bad. Notably, I think analytic philosophy is funny and is going to be a lot better later. And we'll just put stuff where they belong. Okay, so let's jump back into the game and talk about why all these are bad. Alright, mass surveillance gives you extra tax capacity flat, which once you've already have a ton of these modifiers anyways, it's really not going to be all that great. You know, you're getting most of your tax capacity from bureaucratic administration, and unlocks military police force, which I think is, I think this mortality is a negative modifier. I've had discussions with this to some degree, because it does give you minus radicals from discrimination, but I don't think you should be discriminating. I think multiculturalism's meta, so I just think mass surveillance is bad. Antibiotics is kind of okay. It gives you max health institution investment, like maybe you can make an argument for this kind of being belonging in C tier, but we're still going to put it in D tier. You're never rushing this. You're going military tech like late game, and you're going to actively go it even if you can like research antibiotics, and so it's better on high pop countries. Okay. Your country should be high pop by the time you can research this, no matter who you're playing. Mass propaganda, it gives plus 10 authority. Notably, I think it also unlocks another ideology as far as going fascist goes. So if you want to go fascist, max propaganda has like that benefit, but overall it's not very good. 10% authority is also pretty butt this late in the game when you already have so many 10% authority modifiers, because they, like, in terms of proportionally increasing your authority, it's less and less and less. And then, like, also this minimum expected standard of living from literacy is probably... this modifier, you can look at it as either being good or bad, but in any case, the authority is not going to be useful. You're never going to push this. Behaviorism is just bureaucracy pop cost modifier. I guess it's even worse than psychoanalysis because you're going to be pushing military tech at this time, and so okay. And then analytic philosophy is like, maybe I'm misevaluating this. It unlocks a PM in your universities, which is going to increase your innovation by 33%, which is, okay, this is sizable, but you get it at the very end of the game, and it's not something you rush, so maybe a rush for this would be okay-ish. I think you could just build more universities, and it's like, you get tech research speed at the very end of the tech tree. This, to me, doesn't make that much sense. I think it's poor game design to have, faster tech research speed at this point, especially you have to go through psychoanalysis in order to get this, so that makes rushing it a little bit more uncomfortable. I don't know if they like psychoanalysis. Also notably, I think you can get Freud after you get psychoanalysis, but this isn't a reason to, this is a meme thing. So analytic philosophy, it's I don't know, I think it belongs pretty low. I mean, maybe you can make an argument for, we're going to put it in C tier. We're going to give it, like, the benefit of the doubt a little bit. We're going to come back in to do it. But for the most part, we're thinking that it's not very good. I guess, yeah, no, we're going to, maybe there's some sort of strategy where getting the extra 3% on the thing is worth rushing a tier 5 tech for it, but for the most part, I think when you're getting into tier 5 techs, you're just rushing the tank techs, and this is not going to increase the speed at which you get tank stuff, or you're trying to get something that's going to improve your economy by, like, yeah, I don't see it, because the increased innovation notably only affects your natural spread speed, not your active research speed, and so it's not going to make you research the things you're rushing faster, and I think rushing becomes more the meta once you get into the tier 5 tech, so I just think it's bad. Mass surveillance, we're going to put behind mass propaganda. I don't know, put it with the masses. Oh, mass propaganda is not even on here yet. I have a cheat sheet off to the side. We're going to put it behind. And let's put this here. Again, don't think these are good, although you do want the mass propaganda, mass surveillance, I think, if you're trying to go fascist. Antibiotics, we're going to put pretty high up here. We're going to put it up here in D tier. You're not usually going to rush it. Behaviorism's like... Oh my god, I'm exhausted. I'm tired of putting these in. We're going to put it behind psychoanalysis. Just like so many of these texts are bad. Okay, so we're going to do a little bit of a summary here. So, Malaria Prevention is, I think, the most rushable tech in the entire game. As far as these S and A tier techs, I think all of these could be S tier. Like, you can legitimately make an argument for all of them being S tier or make all of them being A tier. And so I put them all in A tier, and the reason for these later ones, and the reason is that I think that these are conditionally like S tier, and because it's so conditional, that they belong maybe more in A tier. For malaria prevention, occasionally malaria prevention is not good, but if colonization is even the slightest consideration in your game, you will probably want to make a push from malaria prevention at some point, and you will likely be researching ahead of time, I think, if you're playing optimally. And so since it's the most rushable tech in the game, even though it's not rushed in 100% of plays, I am going to put it on S tier. For A tier, we have steel frame buildings, which is giving you, better construction PM, a bunch of free infrastructure. It's never going to be bad. It's going to be extremely good if you have New York. and it's also going to help push demand for glass and steel. Mutual funds, if you're going agrarian and if you have a bunch of plantations, this will be extremely strong. Also, if you have a bunch of farms, this will be very powerful. It also has some other more subtle effects, but there's too much to get into. Human rights will allow you to go multiculturalism, which is currently like meta and it's not even close, unless maybe you're playing China, and so this will be really good. Feminism allows you to get increased worker force, was it contribution efficiency? No, that's not what it's called. Workforce ratio, which is really strong modifier. It will be an equilibrium modifier, so it takes a while to kick in, but it's going to be really strong. It gives you access to the laws. Central planning unlocks using phones for the bureaucratic administrations, the government administrations. Also unlocks command economy. I think command economy is not very good, but the phones are good. So usually when you have telephones researched, you research this, or if you have this researched, you research telephones, and so you just wait for one to not spread to you is kind of my estimation. Elevators is kind of solid, but it suffers from being or it's kind of assisted by being a tier 4 tech, because there's really not a lot of good tier 4 society tech, and so maybe you want to get elevators. It's giving a lot of the same stuff steel frame buildings is giving, but not as much. It's giving, you know, the extra free infrastructure as well as arcades, which is actually pretty good PM, but okay. Macroeconomics gives you trade volume and competition. It's a really late game tech though. It's tier 5, and so it will be good if you're doing low infamy play, but I think low infamy play is not necessarily optimal, so maybe this should be C tier. I'm not sure. Socialism allows you to go graduated taxation, notably Council Republic, and also unlocks 2 of the ideologies that can be rolled on your pops, and so if you really want to go Council Republic, you're going to prioritize this. Civilizing Mission +1 level on the institution for colonization, which is pretty good. Anarchism is going to allow you to roll an anarchist, which is good for the same reason socialism is if you're trying to go Council Republic, and okay. And then analytic philosophy is going to it allows you to use a better PM in your universities, but it's also a tier 5 tech. I think there's maybe some strategy to be had rushing it, but I just don't I don't see it. I think it should probably be in D tier, but like the benefit of the doubt, putting it in C tier. And then we have a whole bunch of, you know, not very good tech. I'm not going to go through all this D tier tech, and then we have the memes of the Zeppelins. Anyways, I hope you enjoyed. As far as like this tier list goes, this one was a bit strange because there's so much bad late game society tech, and there's also just the 4 really good techs that it was like very interesting to look at. And you know, I think that as you get in later in the game, you're also going to have more polarized sort of tiers, where you're going to have a lot of things just in uber S tier and then a lot of things in D tier, because what you end up doing later on in the game is sometimes you are much more willing to incur an ahead of time penalty to research stuff faster. So that means there's just a ton more text that you just normally let nat spread to you. That's kind of what D tier means, is you just let the text nat spread to you. It's not that they do nothing, it's just you never go out of your way to get them. Anyways, I hope you enjoyed. Feel free to like, comment, subscribe, and have a good one.